Sometimes the baseball season reveals itself in a game that doesn't look historic at first glance. No pennant clinched, no hitter, no four homer cartoon. Just a Friday afternoon in Chicago, late August 1980, when the Astros walked into Wrigley Field with a real race on their hands. A wounded clubhouse still carrying the shock of J.R. Richards' July stroke. A first place lead that was real, but fragile, and a lineup full of men who understood that on every ordinary looking game in late August is secretly an October game wearing street clothes. Houston wins this one 6-5, and the biggest play of the day belonged to Enos Cabell, a ninth inning RBI single that scored Rafael Landis and turned a tie game into a road win. The box score credits Cabell with just 2 hits and 1 RBI, but that undersells the whole point. This wasn't a fireworks game for him. This was an Enos Cabell game. Contact, pressure, timing, solving the exact problem in front of you. That's why this game matters. Because if you want to understand how a contender really works, you can't study the huge names and the giant peaks. You have to study some of the connective tissue as well. Study the players who keep a team from bleeding out on nights when the starter is just mortal, and the bullpen has to cover half the afternoon, when the lead disappears twice, and then the winning run has to be manufactured by comment doing exact baseball in exact sequence. On August 29, 1980, Enos Cabell was not the loudest Astro in the room, but he was the finishing touch. So today I want to talk about a game that looks small until you really sit with it. I want to talk about a first place team, learning how to hold its shape, and about the value of a player who can seem invisible until the precise instant a game asks, who can be trusted right now? On this day, the answer was Enos Cabell. Welcome back to the Astros 100. I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. Today's player is Enos Cabell. Today's game, August 29, 1980. Houston Astros at Chicago Cubs, Wrigley Field. Astros win 6-5. Houston leads the park 73-55, while the Cubs fall to 50-76. Dave Smith gets the win in relief. Frank LaCourte gets the save. Nolan Ryan starts, but he doesn't dominate, and the last clean stroke of the day belongs to Cabell in the ninth. Meanwhile, out west, the Dodgers also win that same day, so Houston's victory isn't decorative. It keeps the Astros 2 games clear of the National League West. That isn't luxury baseball. This is maintenance baseball. Pressure, adult baseball. That context matters because by the time this game arrives, the 1980 Astros are no longer just a cute possibility. They're a real pennant club carrying real pennant tension. They'll finish tied with LA after 162 games, win the one-game tiebreaker, and push Philadelphia to the limit in a 5-game NLCS. But on this afternoon, none of that is guaranteed yet. It's still being built, inning by inning, decision by decision, road win by road win. So if you're looking for one sentence to guide this episode, here it is. This is a game about how contenders survive imperfect afternoons. Okay, let's start in Houston because the Astros are carrying 2 very different feelings at once. The first, ambition. They brought in Nolan Ryan before the season and brought back Joe Morgan, 2 moves that screamed the organization was tired of, almost. The second is grief, or at least shock. J.R. Richard, who looked like one of the most terrifying pitchers in baseball and had been 10-4 with a 1.90 earned run average in 17 starts, suffered a career-altering stroke on July 30th. So by late August, the Astros aren't just trying to win a division. They're trying to hold themselves together after seeing one of their giants disappear mid-season. And lately on the field, Houston's been doing exactly that. In the week before this game, Houston had already dragged the Cubs through a 12-inning game, then a 17-inning game, then a 2-1 game, split a short St. Louis trip, and opened the Wrigley series with a 4-1 win the day before this game. By the time they take the field on August 29th, Houston isn't gliding, they're grinding. These are the rhythms of a club that knows every win counts twice in a tight race. Now the Cubs are just different. Chicago's not playing for pennant. Chicago's playing out a hard year. The Cubs will finish 64-98, last in the NL East, and they had already changed managers in season. Preston Gomez was fired after starting 38-52, and Joey Malfitano took over on July 25th. But that teams are not harmless teams, especially in a day game at Wrigley with veterans in the lineup. Dave Kingman can change the scoreboard with one swing. Bill Buckner, he can still turn an inning, and Larry Bittner can make pitchers hate life. A bad team in the standings can still be a nasty afternoon if your bullpen sequence wobbles for 10 minutes. That's the emotional setup. Houston arrives carrying urgency. Chicago arrives carrying looseness. And baseball has a habit of making those two moods collide in exactly the messiest possible way. Late August 1980 is one of those baseball moments where the whole sport feels busy in every direction all at once. The Dodgers, who are the team breathing down Houston's neck in the West, also win on August 29th, beating Montreal 5-4 and moving to 70-57. So the Astros don't get to relax into their own result. Their win matters because LA refuses to disappear. In the East, Philadelphia wins that same day as well and keeps moving towards what becomes the first World Series title in franchise history. 2 days earlier, Steve Carlton had picked up his 20th win of the season. So around the league, you got the Phillies looking serious, the Dodgers chasing the Astros, and the Astros trying to prove their nerve is as strong as their talent. Over in the American League, George Brett is still stalking 400. He had pushed over the line earlier in August, peaked at 407 on August 26, and remained at exactly 400 into September. And that matters for an episode like this one because it helps restore the air of the time. Fans in late August 1980 were not only scoreboard watching pennant races, they were also watching for history at the individual level. And that's the beauty of baseball's bandwidth. A single Friday can contain a batting average miracle, a Cy Young campaign, a pennant squeeze, and one quiet game-winning single in Chicago that only looks small until October arrives. So the league-wide weather report is simple. Everything is tightening up. The Astros are managed by Bill Verdon, a baseball lifer and former standout center fielder, who would later be recognized for guiding Houston to its first postseason berth. He isn't running a circus. His teams tend to feel organized, sober, and unsentimental. On the other side is Joey Amalfitano, a former infielder who had played for both the Cubs and the Colt 45s, and who had been pushed into a midseason rescue job in Chicago after Preston Gomez got dismissed. That's one of the nicer connective threads here. The Cubs and Astros are linked, not by hatred, but by baseball people moving through the same old National League corridors. The starters give the game its first layer of electricity. For Houston, it's Nolan Ryan, already age 33. First season with the Astros and already the sport's most mythic fastball, and fresh off his 3,000th strikeout earlier that summer. He isn't just a pitcher in this game. He's the atmosphere. He changes how a ballpark feels. For Chicago, it's Mike Krukow, a 28-year-old right-hander from Long Beach, and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, an in-house Cubs arm who had come up through their system and could give him real innings. Ryan's a legend, and Krukow's the working major leaguer, trying to outduel a legend and sequencing with nerve. As for Hall of Fame presence, Houston has two actual Cooperstown names in uniform this day, Joe Morgan and Nolan Ryan. Morgan had returned to Houston for the 1980 season after his Cincinnati years and helped drive the club's first playoff run. Ryan, of course, he's Ryan. Chicago doesn't have a Hall of Famer in the starting lineup, but they do have one in reserve in Bruce Sutter, who enters later out of the bullpen, plus recognizable baseball landmarks like Bill Buckner, Dave Kingman, and the still young Krukow, who would later become famous all over again as a broadcaster. So the star power imbalance is clear, and it's real, but it's not total. The Cubs can still put familiar faces, dangerous faces in your way, and that creates a nice all-time contrast. Houston looks like a contender, stocked with resume. Chicago looks like a spoiler, stocked with sharp edges. Here's the subplot I would lean on all episode long. This is an Astros team trying to prove it's more than the Astrodome and more than the headline names, because the earliest way to remember the 1980 Astros is through the big nouns: Ryan, Morgan, J.R. Richard, tiebreaker, NLCS heartbreak. But to become a real division winner, Houston had to be good in uglier, smaller pieces too. They had to play baseball, day baseball in Chicago. They had to play after extra inning slugfests the previous week. And they had to patch together innings after Richard's absence rearranged the emotional structure of the staff. This game wasn't about glamour. It was about providing the machine works off-site. I don't think this is one of those games where there's a famous quote war. This is more like sarcasm. The Cubs side of it is probably, you first place guys sure do spend a lot of time in one run games. And the Astros side is probably, and yet you still haven't figured out how to beat us. That's pretty fair because Houston's already been squeezing Chicago to death in this stretch. 3-2 and 12, 1-0 in 17, 2-1, 4-1, and then this 6-5 result. It's not a blood feud. It's something colder. One team increasingly believing it knows how these games end. The Astros are still emotionally identified with the Astrodome, a closed roof, an artificial environment, controlled baseball. Then you drop them into Wrigley with sunlight, grass, breeze, weird bounces, afternoon shadows, and the old human disorder of a day game. It's a nice reminder that good teams must be bilingual. You have to speak dome and daylight. You have to win in your own machine and in someone else's weather. Houston does that here. Enos Milton Cabell is a terrific player to build an episode around because his career explains something important about baseball value that highlight culture often misses. He was born October 8th, 1949 at Fort Riley, Kansas. He grew up in Gardenia, California, and started as an athlete in high school. He went to LA Harbor College and signed with the Orioles as an amateur free agent in 1968. In the minors, he hit immediately and often. Batting title, player of the year honors, the kind of steady offensive credibility that tells an organization this isn't a fluke body or a fluke month. Baltimore gave him a path to the majors, but not a clear everyday job. Cabell wanted to play, and eventually that want turned into a trade. That trade changes his life. Baltimore sends Cabell to Houston after the 1974 season, and when he gets there, he becomes one of the defining position players of the late 70 Astros core. He moves around. He plays outfield, first base, and then settles heavily at third. He hits for average, more than power, runs far better than people remember, and eventually becomes one of those players whose value lives in accumulation. In 1977, he hits 282 with 16 home runs, 68 RBI, 100 runs, and 42 steals. In 1978, he hits 295 with 195 hits, which at the time set a team record, and steals another 33 bases. From 1977 through 1980, he posts 4 straight 30-steal seasons, making him the first player in franchise history to do that. The full career line is not Cooperstown, but it is serious baseball. 277, 1,647 hits, 238 stolen bases over 15 major league seasons. And I think the easiest way to describe Cabell at his best is this. He was a winning team's answer to the question, who can do a little of everything without having to stop the game and talk about it? He's not a franchise icon. He's the player who allows the icon to matter. He keeps innings alive. He moves the board. He makes the game less complicated for everyone else. And that's a day like August 29th, 1980 fits him perfectly. It wasn't a masterpiece and it wasn't a myth. Just his exact kind of player. The exact kind of game, his kind of player wins. And for Cabell specifically, this game works as a thesis. By 1980, he's no longer young and upping. He's no longer an up-and-comer trying to prove he belongs. He's 30, a core player on a team trying to reach the postseason for the first time in franchise history. Because Houston now has Ryan and Morgan, because Jose Cruz and Cesar Cedeno are flashier offensive presences, and because the whole team's emotional story is tilted towards the pennant and towards J.R. Richards' unexpected stroke, Cabell can get visually pushed into the background, even while remaining structurally essential. This game drags him back into focus in the most truthful way possible. He doesn't need 4 hits. He doesn't need a homer. He doesn't need a heroic speech. He just needs one of the day's best plate appearances at the right moment. The top plate chart on the box score gives Cabell's 9th inning RBI single the biggest positive swing of the game for Houston. And that matters because it confirms what your eyes should already tell you. His hit wasn't just the last run, it was the turning point that survived. So if you're playing Cabell honestly, play him as a professional among professionals. Not underrated in the fake internet sense where we say to flatter someone. Underrated in the practical baseball sense. If he disappeared from the roster, the team would feel thinner immediately. The Astros come out in the first inning and do exactly what you want a road contender to do. They put immediate pressure on the starter. Joe Morgan singles. The Astros keep the line moving. Jose Cruz drives in the first run. Cesar Cedeno adds a run-producing ground out, and Houston's up 2-0 before Wrigley even settled down. Feels like for maybe 5 minutes, this might be a clean Nolan Ryan afternoon, where the lead arrives early and the game turns into a formality. But that feeling doesn't last. Dave Kingman homers in the second, and the Cubs really flip the game in the third. Mike Krukow helps himself. Mike Krukow helps start the inning himself when Chicago strings together enough traffic to create stress. Then they cash it. Kingman adds a sacrifice fly. Larry Bittner produces a 2-run single, and suddenly the Astros are down 4-2. And the script has changed from Houston takes control to Houston now has to prove it can recover. And that shift matters here because Nolan Ryan, well, he's not awful. He's not supernatural either. I know you like to think so. He only lasts 5 innings, gives up 4 earned runs, walks 1, strikes out 2, and leaves with the game still losable. This is exactly the kind of game that can expose a team. You paid for the ace. You got 5 decent but fragile innings instead. What happens next tells you whether the club is mature. And the one thing I like here, Mike Krukow is doing enough to make Houston work. 5 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, 3 strikeouts. Not dominance, but resistance. The Cubs aren't handing Houston anything. Houston has to take it back themselves. And the 6th inning is where the Astros begin acting like a first-place team again. Jose Cruz triples, and that's the ignition. Cesar Cedeno singles him home, and Chicago goes to the bullpen. Denny Walling helps advance the inning. Alan Ashby lifts a sacrifice fly, and just like that, the 4-2 deficit is gone. It's 4-4. No panic, no giant uppercut, just professional repair work. The box score's leverage chart flags Cruz's triple as one of the day's biggest Houston swings, and that feels right. It's the hit that reopens the game. Then the Cubs answer. In the bottom of the 6th, Dave Smith is now in for Houston, and Chicago scratches another run across the plate on Mike Vale's pinch hit RBI single. The Cubs are back in front 5-4. Again, this is why the game is interesting. Houston keeps having to solve the same problem twice. The top of the 8th is one of my favorite half innings in the whole game because it feels like pure National League texture. Cesar Cedeno doubles, Bruce Sutter balks into third, then Denny Walling lines a single to right, and the game is tied again 5-5. That Walling single shows up as another positive major swing for Houston on the top play chart, and it should. This is the run that keeps Cabell's moment possible. And now we get to the 9th. Rafael Landis-Stoy singles and steals second. Dave Bergman, hitting for Dave Smith, is retired. Joe Morgan grounds out, but it's productive. Landis-Stoy gets the third. And now Enos Cabell comes up with 2 outs and a man 90 feet away. This is the whole episode right here. No exaggeration required. Cabell singles, Landis-Stoy scores. Astros 6, Cubs 5. Then Frank LaCourte comes in, works the 9th, and closes it. Ball game. If you want the condensed meaning of the play-by-play, it's this. Houston scored first. Chicago punched back. Houston repaired the damage. Chicago punched back again. Houston answered a third time, and this time the answer held. And that's contender behavior. Now, for Houston, this game meant standing upright in the race. The Astros moved to 73-55 with the win. Because the Dodgers also won that day, though, Houston didn't gain ground. But it did preserve a 2-game lead. In a tight race, that's massive distinction. A loss here wouldn't have been a catastrophe, but it would have been a leak. And the 1980 Astros were living in a season where every leak mattered. They'd eventually need every ounce of stability they could find before they wound up tied with LA after 162 games and needing 1 extra game to finish the division. For Chicago, this game meant something different. It was another respectable loss in a losing season, which is its own kind of baseball sadness. The Cubs hit enough to make trouble. Kingman homered, Bittner drove in 2. The bullpen got the game deep, but the club still lacked the final seal, the last stop, the extra layer of hardness that separates spoiler energy from winning structure. And that's how a 74-98 season often looks in miniature. Not always hopeless, sometimes even competitive, but not built to pitch, not built to own the biggest pitch or the biggest bat. And that contrast is why the game works so well. Both teams look alive, but only one team looks sustainable. And a casual fan might look at this box score and ask, why this one? Well, the answer is this, because this is one of those games that teaches you what baseball is really made of. If all you want spectacle, you can always find a more explosive game than this one. But if you want to understand why baseball people fall in love with the sport, it's often because of games exactly like this. Games where the lead changes shape, where the bullpen becomes a chessboard, where a runner getting to second on a steal matters as much as the ball in the seats, and where a sacrifice fly is not as boring at all because it's architecture, and where the winning hit belongs not to the loudest star, but to the player who has to be prepared to be exact all day. This game is also a good gateway for a new fan because it contains almost every baseball emotion in digestible size: early scoring, a comeback, a home run, a relief pivot, pinch hitting, a stolen base that actually matters, a veteran Hall of Famer in Joe Morgan helping to set the table, another Hall of Famer in Nolan Ryan being good but not perfect, and then the simple, clean thrill of a man lining a two-out single that changes the afternoon. That's baseball stripped down to its bones. Maybe most importantly, this game teaches the right lesson about value. Stars win headlines, teams win because someone like Enos Cabell is there when the headline needs a spine. Uh, okay. Okay. Houston's too deep into the race to romanticize a single August win, but too smart not to understand its value. The imagined post-game sound of this episode is not shouting, it's an exhale. And after this game, Houston kept pushing. The Astros won again the next day in Chicago 2-0 before dropping the series finale. They finished the regular season tied with LA, beat the Dodgers 7-1 in the tiebreaker for the franchise's first ever postseason berth, and then lost one of the great painful series in baseball history to the Phillies in 5 games in the National League Championship Series. On the team page, that season lands at 93-70 because the tiebreaker counted in the regular season totals. However you phrase it, this August win was one brick in the wall that got him here. Chicago, meanwhile, kept being Chicago in 1980. The Cubs finished 64-98 and 6th in the NL East. Joey Amalfitano's late season stewardship didn't change the bigger reality. This is a club between answers. And that's why this game reads the way it does in retrospect. The Cubs make enough noise to test Houston, but not enough to redirect their own story. Excuse me. Cabell's story after this afternoon is complicated, which is one reason why he's such a strong documentary subject. He finished 1980 with a .276 average, 55 RBI, and 21 steals. Then was traded that winter from Houston to San Francisco in a deal that brought Bob Knepper and Chris Borjos to the Astros. From there, he played for the Giants, Tigers, then returned to Houston and later played for the Dodgers. He had another excellent season in 1983 with Detroit, hitting .311, and then came back to the Astros in 1984 because Houston still believed in what he brought to a club. Then his life darkened. In the mid-1980s, Cabell became entangled in the cocaine scandal that hit baseball, testified to drug use, and was among the players suspended under conditions that included drug testing, community service, and salary forfeiture if they wanted reinstatement. He complied. His playing career ended after 1986. But that isn't the end of the story. He worked in broadcasting, served in athletics, administration, and eventually returned to the Astros in the front office, where he spent decades in community and advisory roles. And that matters. It doesn't erase the damage, but it does complete the portrait. Cabell's baseball life is not a straight, clean line. It's fallibility, consequence, and durable connection to the sport and franchise that mattered to him most. I think that fuller life story adds power to this episode because on August 29, 1980, you're not just looking at a box score line. You're looking at a human being in his middle chapter. Not the beginning and not the wreckage, not the redemption. Just the working middle where he's still what most teams need him to be. Next time we stay in 1980, but we move deeper into the season and closer to the furnace. Astro 24, Vern Rule. September 26, 1980. If today was about the everyday contender, the player who solves the exact problem in front of him, next time we get something tighter, later, and more openly pennant-shaped. Same season, different pressure. Different style of heroism. Enos Cabell's game is about the infrastructure of winning. Vern Rule's game is going to feel like baseball with the walls closing in. Well, that was Astros 23, Enos Cabell, August 29, 1980. Wrigley Field, Astros 6, Cub 5. A two-hit day that says more about baseball than a lot of louder games ever could. Not because Cabell carried the whole afternoon, because he finished it, because he fit it, because when the inning got small and exact and serious, he gave Houston the one clean answer it needed. And that's worth documenting. Thanks for watching.